were the Mandan Indians? It is believed the Mandan were one of the earliest Native Americans whom originated in the Ohio River Valley and migrated west between the 7th and 13th centuries. They settled on the banks of the Missouri River and eventually the Heart River in what is now North Dakota. For many years, the peace-seeking Mandan thrived and created a rich culture. The language in which the Mandan spoke is part of the Siouan language family and had two dialects, Nupter and Nuter. It was believed there were about 15,000 Mandan in the 18th century. This all before the Mandan were devastated by the European-brought disease of smallpox that took out almost their entire population, rendering their culture and language almost extinct. The Mandan were foragers and a horticulturalist group. They lived in permanent villages and practiced gender-specialized divisions of labor. The women were responsible for crops such as corn, beans, squash, and sunflower, and the men hunted buffalo, among other animals. The social organization of the Mandan was based on kinship and age sets. They practiced polygyny, and marriages were often arranged by parents, but children's wishes were taken into account. Divorce was permitted, and it was not uncommon or even unacceptable for married women to elope with another man, provided the man losing his wife was paid with some sort of gift by the new husband. There were different types of marriage, and depending on a family's status, either a bride wealth would be paid or an uneven reciprocal exchange favoring the bride's family was common practice. The Mandan were known for their very sturdy round lodges, made with logs tied together with plant fibers and covered with willow rods and grass. Villages had anywhere between 12 and 100 lodges that surrounded a sacred cedar post in the center of the village that represented their cultural hero. Each village had 3 chiefs, each serving their own purpose, a chief for peace, one for war, and another as a day-to-day village leader. The cedar post at the center of the village was often the center for ceremonies. The proximity of a family's lodge to the cedar post was in accordance to the significance of a family's ceremonial duties and their status to the tribe. Perhaps one of the more important ceremonies was the Opeka ceremony in late spring. The ceremony was to celebrate the creation myth, to bring visions to youth coming of age, and in hopes to bring about a good food supply for the coming year. The ceremony lasted for 4 days and required young men to fast during that time. They would have their bodies slashed, and they were hung from ceilings by ropes, not only in an effort to prove their manhood, but also for purposes of inducing a vision quest. As in many shamanistic religions, the Mandan used medicine bundles, which were like portable shrines that could be given to other members within a clan or inherited. Medicine bundles were important to religious ceremonies, and each one usually had a story behind it. They often contained various items such as seeds, animal teeth, tobacco, grass, rocks, and other items. Their first encounter by non-Indians was a French-Canadian explorer named Sieur de la Vérendrye in 1738. La Vérendrye spoke highly of the Mandan, as they were immediately cordial, welcoming him by offering him plate after plate of buffalo corn and squash. La Vérendrye was intrigued by the many ways of the Mandan, from their urban planning and cleanliness of their streets, to their tattoos, wickerwork, and the games they played. The Mandan were greatly remembered for their encounters with famous explorers Lewis and Clark in the winter of 1804, when Lewis and Clark first came in contact with Sacagawea. It was then that Sacagawea joined their westward journey with Lewis and Clark as a guide, translator, and a token of peace. It was soon after their contact with Sieur de la Vérendrye that the Mandan became actively involved in trade, most notably fur trade, often acting as middlemen between the French and the Native Americans. Their location put them at the center of many trade routes. In addition to fur, the Mandan traded other items such as copper shells, guns, horses, various crops, and flint. Northwest Company began trade with the Mandan, and later Hudson Bay Company joined in fur trade as well. They frequented trade with the Mandan for many years. The popularity of the fur trade slowly dwindled, and all trade was greatly disrupted with the War of 1812. The demise of the Mandan came about with the European-introduced disease of smallpox. In 1750, it was estimated that 3,600 Mandan lived along the Heart River in North Dakota. The first devastating wave of smallpox occurred between 1780 and 1781, when 1,500 to 2,000 people were said to have perished as a result. By the time Lewis and Clark encountered the Mandan in 1804, their numbers had dwindled to a mere 1,200. In 1832, after much argument over federal funds, Congress passed the Indian Vaccination Act of 1832, which granted a mere $17,000 toward a vaccination program for Native Americans. Secretary of War Lewis Cass was given full authority over the program, to which he selected specific groups to be vaccinated and set limitations and denials for other groups. At no point were any Native Americans consulted over funding or distribution of the vaccine. It has been suggested that Cass specifically ordered vaccinations be limited in the lower Missouri River Valley due to economic and political motivations. Cass thought the Mandans as savages, and in his own ethnocentric words, quote, "The Indians in that extensive region are to this day far beyond the operation of any causes, primary or secondary, which can be traced to civilized man." Unquote. In 1837, an American Fur Company steamboat traveling the Missouri River was said to have brought the final devastating wave of smallpox, reducing the Mandan population from about 1,600 to 125. In 1845, the surviving Mandan moved with neighboring tribe, the Hidatsa, whom were also greatly affected by smallpox and excluded from vaccination. In 1862, yet another neighboring tribe excluded from vaccination, the Arikara, joined, forming one tribe. Between all three tribes, what once was tens of thousands of people was reduced to a few hundred. The three tribes were eventually moved to Fort Berthold Reservation in 1870, but the amount of land that the three tribes has held has been reduced over time. By 1910, they were reduced to 900,000 acres. In 1951, Garrison Dam was built, creating Lake Sacagawea and resulting in flooding of more than 25% of the reservation, taking a whopping 152,360 additional acres of Fort Berthold Reservation. The descendant population of the three tribes combined living on Fort Berthold today is 5,915, but unfortunately, the last full-blooded Mandan died in 1971. As of 2009, there was only one fluent speaker of Mandan still alive, and although some cultural practices are still in place, other practices have changed with time and the merge of other tribes. The original culture and language of the Mandan are now pages in a history book.